Please welcome President and Chief Executive Officer Hilton Worldwide, Chris Nassetta, in discussion with Skift co-founder and editor-in-chief, Jason Clampett.
I always hate following Dennis because he always makes me look bad with all his great questions. So I'm just going to ask follow-ups to all of his questions. So
come on,
you're ready.
Let's make it interesting.
Okay. I want to thank Chris for being here today. I also want to thank all of you for being there. As you saw with our last session, you can ask questions from the audience. We'll and then upvote them, and then at the end, I will ask 2 or 3, see what we have. So please participate like that, because we like to have your questions. We'll start off a bit. We'll start off here. Earlier this year, you started your Stop Clicking Around campaign. Are we done clicking around?
I figured you'd start with the OTA since Glenn just walked off stage. And by the way, we had a very nice greeting in the back. All was well. We actually kicked off.
They didn't even shake hands. It was pretty cold.
Not true. We started our Stop Clicking Around campaign actually, I think it was last March or April. And that was really, that was a campaign, but it was part of an overarching strategy, which was really simple. And that is, we want to have as many direct relationships with our customers as we can. And the question would be then, I'll ask it for you, why? Because we think ultimately having more direct relationships with our customers allows them to get a better value and a better experience, both because of what we can do for them from a digital sense in the experience, but also when they engage with us more directly, we know a heck of a lot more about them, and as a consequence, we have a much better ability to deliver in a customized, personalized way what they want. So that's what Stop Clicking Around has been. That's what I would say sort of a broader book direct campaign has been. And what I would say is you're going to see that forever in some form or another, meaning that like any company, the more that we can have direct relationships, the better from our point of view.
Glenn said something on stage about how he loves a level playing field, which he probably doesn't. They're spending.
That's an interesting.
Between Priceline and Expedia, they're spending $6 billion
exactly.
a year on Google, and that creates a challenge for hotel brands in competing there. How do you differentiate to consumers then the difference between booking on a third party and booking directly through you guys?
I think it's really straightforward. Unfortunately, sometimes when you have that, many billions of dollars being spent on the other side of it, there's a lot of noise in terms of getting the message to customers. I think a reason a customer, I sort of referenced it before, should want to have a direct relationship with us is you get a better value. In the end analysis, if you're a customer, any customers out there listening, you're going to get the best price by buying through us. You're going to get points which have real value. They're essentially a currency in today's world. You're going to have access to a whole bunch of digital tools through our app, including digital check-in, room selection, digital key, and some other things that hopefully we're going to talk about later that we think are going to be really innovative. And by engaging with us and letting us know more about you, we're going to be able to keep customizing the experience. So in the end, it's really simple. You get a better value and you get a better experience. And that's why we think customers should want to buy through us. Now, there's a whole lot of money being spent ultimately out there. I think, we're all trying to build loyalty. We're all trying to build direct relationships. There's a whole lot of money on the other side of that being spent to convince customers that the better value and the better experience can be bought somewhere else. And so when I say, stop clicking around or whatever, our Book Direct campaign that we started last year is here forever, I meant it, meaning it will take on different forms and iterations, but it will never go away because we are always going to want to have more direct relationships with our customers. Now, the follow-on question, since I'm doing Q&A by myself, would be, well, then how do you deal? Those of you that know me know I like to do this. I'm going to catch you out. how is our relationship? That would lead one to believe that we have an unbelievably contentious relationship with the OTAs.
Right.
We actually did shake hands, and we have a perfectly fine relationship. And I think we'll continue to. That doesn't mean that there's, like any relationship, it doesn't ebb and flow. But I think of the OTAs, or any, by the way, of hundreds of intermediaries that we use across the world in our business, at a business of our scale, is all about one word. And that's incrementality, okay? Incrementality, meaning whenever we're looking at a relationship with any intermediary that we're accessing a customer through, we're looking at, does it make sense? Is that business that incrementally we can get at a reasonable price that would add to our market share, add to our bottom line, help make our owners more money that we otherwise might not have access to at a reasonable price? So when I think about the OTAs, the reason I would say we honestly do have a pretty healthy relationship is there is a segment of the business, okay, and we'll talk more about it, that, that I think we can efficiently get to customers that don't travel very often, that are more leisure in orientation, more weekend type travelers that don't care about brand loyalty, sadly for me. Thankfully, there are 70 million that do in our world, but there's some that don't. And for those types of customers, then accessing them through third-party intermediaries can be beneficial.
And once you do that, is the dream you hold on to them forever so they never have to go to that again? Or
The dream is, of course, that we do. The dream is that we engage them in real ways from the standpoint of our products, our service, loyalty, technology, innovation, so they say, geez, I could do it directly with you guys and get a better value. But that's not going to be the case with everybody. There are going to be travelers, and there are plenty of them out there, that just don't travel enough and just, in the end, don't care about some of those things. Thankfully, for our business, the majority do care.
What do they care about instead? Is it price?
I think they care about price and ease. They don't travel very often. So it might be, a great example is packaging, So if I'm a leisure traveler on the weekend, I get this, and I want to go one-stop shop and get my air, I want my hotel, I want my rent-a-car, I want to maybe access, local events or whatever, and I can do it real easily in one place, and it feels like a decent value. And I do this once a year, or once every other year. That's not necessarily a bad decision on their part. Now, if they travel more frequently, then maybe that, having a direct relationship makes a heck of a lot more sense. And as I say, we have 70 million honors members by 2019 on the pace we're going. We'll have 100 million and growing honors members. So thankfully, the bulk of our system, if you look at our average occupancy contribution from honors members, it's almost 60% of all of our revenues come from honors members. So the bulk of our guests realize that having that kind of direct relationship works, but not all of them. And in the end, we want customers to be able to buy the way they want to buy as long as they're fully informed on the value proposition. If they're fully informed and understand they can get the best price through us, they can get all these other benefits they're experiencing, and they still want to buy through somebody else, then so be it. We still want them as a customer.
So with the packaging that you mentioned, Accor decided this year that, hey, they said we're gonna throw air, we're gonna try to start selling air. Is there any reason for Hilton to be like, okay, this is our, we're gonna sell you the room, we're gonna sell you experiences, we're gonna sell you restaurant reservations, we're gonna sell you vacation packages?
I don't have a big announcement here on that today, but I will tell you, if you look today at our app, which is award-winning, #1 rated app in travel, and I'd say is sort of at the tip of the iceberg, you're starting to see elements of that kind of functionality. You can connect to Uber, you can connect to local events. Soon you'll be connecting to local food and beverage options. So it is not too far out there to think at some level you'll be able to connect to rent-a-car, to air, rail, and those things. We haven't done it in a formalized way, but it's certainly something that we will very seriously contemplate to serve a certain type of customer. I think, again, that the customer that if you really narrow it down that's looking for that is more typically a weekend leisure, generally more of an infrequent traveler. But again, we want those travelers as well, particularly on weekends, because weekends is where we always have capacity.
Right.
Not in every single hotel in the world, but if you look at the patterns of occupancy, weekends you have capacity. So the smarter we can get on that, the better. I think we'll talk more about technology in our app. I think we're in our infancy on creating connectivity and creating something that, essentially in the palm of your hand, the customers have unprecedented levels of choice and control. So those are the kinds of things that I would say would be choice and control. If customers want it, we're eventually going to want to give it to them.
Choice and control are great. Other options of booking things are good. Do you think that there are other ways through digital experience or even in-person experience to communicate with guests these days who have other concerns? One of the themes is this perm anxiety, people concerned about travel, whether it's a political environment or the kind of global situation. Guests are a little more worried about coming and things. Is there a way that you can use technology to communicate to guests that, hey, things are cool, or,
I mean, of course, we have some really interesting things going on that are more than beta test on the app in terms of two-way communication within the hotels, in terms of problem resolution, or just anything that you may need, including having anxiety over what's going on in the world. And the feedback so far, I think we have 500 hotels set up on this platform and growing as we test it, is spectacular. Now, I would say, if I'm being fair, it has a lot less. I know everybody wants to talk politics today. It's like, can't watch football, can't do anything without politics. There's nowhere to hide. So I want to stay away from that as best I can today. But that is a mechanism, I would say, for broader communication. To be honest, it has a lot more to do with people having issues on property or having needs, or they want to see something in the local environment. Anything they want, we'll address, including anxiety over the political environment. And what we're finding is just the ability to communicate real time with our customers about anything is driving satisfaction up at a very rapid pace.
Since we won't talk about politics, we'll talk. Back in January, you were very optimistic about the business environment that was going to
I was indeed.
Do you have the same level of optimism now? You have 9 months of activity out there, the domestic and international travel. What's the feeling?
I would say, being fair, I'm probably somewhat less optimistic than I was 9 months ago, but I'm still cautiously optimistic. By nature, I'm an optimistic guy, so that's sort of a foundation to all of it. But here's why I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic that the economy, notwithstanding all of these things in the political world that are swirling in North Korea and with healthcare and all of the uncertainty around the legislative environment, continues to chug along at a reasonable pace. If you look at any expectations for the second half of this year, and as you look into next year, people that are a lot smarter than me still think that you're going to see, both globally and particularly here in the U.S., an uptick in GDP. Not huge, but a modest uptick. They think you're going to see an uptick on capital investment spending, non-residential fixed investment. By the way, the highest correlation to demand growth in the hotel space is non-residential fixed investment. So, I mean, people that study these things, certainly what I see supports it, would suggest that we're not racing to the moon, but that things are sort of have the potential and likelihood to get incrementally a little bit better. So I think that's reason for optimism. Now, there's some things that could happen that would help that, and there are a whole bunch of them. I think the Fed, sort of responsibly backing out of the quantitative easing days, which is starting to happen, and doing that thoughtfully will matter a lot. I think legislatively, my personal belief is tax reform is probably the single most important thing for the psychology, certainly in the business community, that would unlock capital investment, would unlock some hiring, just because it would show progress and ultimately will translate, if done properly, into free cash flow that's available to make investments, to hire new people. And so I think, time will tell whether that gets done. There's a lot of noise in my hometown. I live inside the Beltway, for better or for worse. But, I think there's a chance that gets done. And even, as I say, in the meantime, while we have all of this noise, not to be a Pollyanna, the economy is doing okay. Now, I can't help but, talk about our business, for a second, because you invited me here, so I get that my job is to market our business. Even in that environment, for us, things are fantastic. We closed yesterday at an all-time high. and the markets are good, but I think what the markets are seeing in us and should see in us is that even in an environment which is growing on a same-store basis, but honestly growing at a relatively modest pace, maybe upside potential, but at the moment at a modest pace, because of our unit growth, which in every region of the world is at the highest levels we've ever seen it, both in pipeline and new unit deliveries, we're growing at the highest, one of the highest rates that we've seen. We're opening more than a hotel a day somewhere in the world, and we're doing it largely with the use of third-party capital. And so our business model in a post-spin world, we spun out 2 companies earlier this year, is a very simple algorithm, if you will, of same-store, new unit growth with some of the strongest brands in the business that are attracting huge amounts of capital all around the world that are driving our growth and driving our profitability and our ability to continue to return capital to shareholders. And so I'm optimistic that the economy will hopefully get better, but I'm really optimistic about our business, which is even in this kind of environment, it performs really well.
So from your last answer, it's clear you know a bit about real estate, your background.
A little bit. I forgot everything I knew.
The last few years, hotels have been going asset light, spinning off all these assets. You get a few $100 million in your pocket, for every spinoff. You did 2 recent spinoffs. Now that you're done spinning, and you don't have, a few $100 million in cash coming in, what's the next way forward?
I think the next way forward, would be as a pure now consumer branded business to lean in even harder in delivering great product, great service, great loyalty, and great innovation so that everything we're doing is really keeping the customer front and center in our mind. Now, you could sort of say, well, weren't you doing that before? Right. You still have all, the same brands you had. And the answer is, of course we were. We were really very focused on all of those things. And I think doing quite a good job, which is reflected in our growth and our market share. Having said that, it was a much bigger business. With that come distractions, of having a big real estate business, a big timeshare business, both of which are fabulous businesses, but they're different. And so for the senior management team, there was always an element of sort of, splitting your time between those things. That doesn't have to happen anymore. And so I can tell you, I said this, to our board about 1.5 years ago, as the spins were coming. I said, we've had a wonderful almost decade of, transformation of taking Hilton from what was a really sort of laggard performer, certainly many, many decades ago had been the leading performer in the business, but had become a lagging performer, and we bent the arc of the curve. And we went public almost 4 years ago. Our statistics, were the best in the industry on top line, bottom line, unit growth, all those things. But we had come a long way. And it's really easy, the normal arc of the curve is to say, hey, all right, well, nice job, right. Yay us, and become complacent again. But we're not going to do it. What we've been doing is using the spins as a mechanism with our board, with our management team to bend the arc of the curve again. And the arc of that curve has to do with continuing to double down on making sure our products really resonate with customers, that we're adding products to fill gaps, that we never forget the business we're in, which is people serving people, and that we deliver extraordinary experiences, that loyalty is taken to the next level, and importantly, and I hope we can talk about it a bit, that we're really innovative, that we're really using technology in a very different way than our industry has historically used it or we've used it to really do things that resonate with customers.
So you mentioned filling gaps. Is there any gap in the hotel world that isn't trying to be filled with a lifestyle or a soft brand right now?
We have 14 brands. My guess is we have another 3 or 4 that we're going to add, and I think the truth is we are hyper disciplined about making sure that we have brands that stay in swim lanes. Right. So I'm really comfortable as I look at what we're doing very scientifically about demand in the industry that we're serving, demand patterns. Clearly there's a little overlap around right. the edges of all of them, but we wouldn't launch a brand if we didn't think it really met a customer need.
I'm going to give you a pop quiz related to that.
Okay.
I'm going to name a lifestyle brand, and I'd like you to tell me who the parent company is.
Oh my God, all right.
True.
True. Hilton.
Okay, that was an easy one, sorry.
Hey, all right, I got that.
Aloft.
That's Marriott, formerly Starwood.
Okay. Avid.
Avid is IHG.
Good. You were reading Skift last week, right?
Yeah, you guys covered
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Canopy?
Hilton. God, if I can't get those, I'm brain
I
dead.
was hoping to trip you up. I'm sorry about that. So speaking of brands, let's talk a little bit about, you've talked about Airbnb differently and the threat from non-traditional lodging. You've talked about them a little differently than your peers.
Have I? Yeah, okay.
Kind of throwing them out there as, hey, you know, they're not going to disrupt me, they're going to disrupt the OTAs maybe. Can you talk a little bit about how you think first when a consumer chooses an Airbnb over a hotel room, and then also how you think about it in terms of your competitive set?
I mean, here, I don't know that I've been that different than my competitors. But if I have, fine. I think of Airbnb as a really solid business. You know, obviously, it's a business that's been around for, 1,000 years. It's being made really efficient, and I think I would applaud the guys that created it as creating something that customers want and creating mass efficiency around something that people demand. Having said that, the reason that I haven't, I do worry about it, and I'll talk about why I worry about it. What I don't worry about is that it's directly competitive, the bulk of it. The core of the business, I think, is really satisfying a different trip occasion than the bulk of what we do. And I'd say in a really oversimplified way, we're in the business of hospitality, taking great products at the different price points and then wrapping it in authentic, heartfelt service. We're not just lodging. And I'd say no matter how they connect all the dots, in the end, Airbnb is more of a lodging alternative that ends up being very heavily oriented towards leisure, weekend, extended stay, multiple occupancy, and a big value proposition. Okay, we're the premium, right? Our average market share of all our brands is 115%. We're not trying to be the cheap alternative. We're trying to be the premium alternative. And so I think we're just something, you could debate that. I think we're something very different. Now, what I do worry about with Airbnb, and I think our industry worries about, and I think we have every reason to, is that what it started as and what it has become are two very different things. If you look at a very large, it's somewhere between 30 to 50% of the inventory on Airbnb are really commercial operations that are basically hotels. There's units that people have put together and they're renting them as a business. Why do I worry about that? Well, it's competitive. So some people want to say, well, you're just worried about them competing with you. No, I'm not. Of course, I worry about all my competitors. I see a bunch of them in the audience. I worry about all of them, and I worry about them. I don't wake up at night crying about it, but I worry about it. But what I do worry about is people having different rules. I do worry about them not having a regulatory environment that matches up with ours, because it's unfair to compete against somebody that basically has little or few or no rules. If you walked into my office and said, hey, we're going to give you carte blanche, you don't have to adhere to any rules of organized labor. You don't have to have ADA compliance, fire, life safety, pay insurance. Maybe you pay taxes some places, maybe you don't. I could tell you.
Not a bad idea.
If the government wants to tell me that, I don't think it's responsible, but it would sure as heck allow me to drive more profitability and be that much more competitive. So I think that's how, in the core of what they do and how they started, people sharing, a room or, a limited number of nights of a whole unit or a couch. That's not, I just don't think that's really directly competitive. We've looked at data upside down and sideways. I don't think that's directly competitive. I think that is not an issue. I think it's where you're talking about illegal commercial operations that are directly competitive with a whole different set of rules. And I think that's, when you see our industry versus them, those are fair discussions to be having. That's not the old economy companies wanting to hurt the new. That's just, sort of have a level playing field. And I think that's sort of our industry's view is create a level playing field. You do what you do, we'll do what we do.
Switching gears a little bit for our last question here.
We're going to talk about technology and innovation, right?
As you think about the guest of the future coming into your rooms and making decisions about, the check-in and communicating with staff and interacting with TVs or things like that, what's the, talk me through their process.
Yeah, so, if you go on our app today, hopefully everybody in the audience, including competitors, has it. I talked about it a little bit, we're at the tip of the iceberg. And the whole idea is here, from a technological point of view, to give people control in the palm of their hands. So we've done that in a bunch of ways. You go on the app, you can book, you can dream, you can do pre-arrival. Now you can check in digitally in the entire system. You can select your room, which nobody else has really done at scale, and it's with Google Maps. You can see what your view is. You can look at your actual room. Know what you're looking at. You can do digital key, so you don't, from the prior speaker, you don't have to go to the front desk. And that, by the way, isn't an experiment with us. That's in half the system. By the end of this year, we'll have 2,500 hotels installed. By the end of next year, if all goes well, the whole system. And the next sort of down payment, and I call it a down payment, and it's important to know because I think that we're at the very beginning. But the next down payment, which again is focusing on an area that nobody can do but us, like check-in, we're the only ones that can really do that, is in the room. And the thing that we are beta testing that we'll be in a position next year to roll out is what we call our connected room. So imagine a world where the room knows you and you know your room. And it sounds simple. So imagine a world where you walk into your room, you've used your digital key to check in, so we know you're there, and you have told us all your preferences. Maybe that's Netflix, maybe that's Hulu, maybe that's Spotify for music. You've told us what temperature you like the room. You've told us how you like the lighting. Imagine a world when you walk in, the TV says, "How are you doing, John? Nice to see you." And all of your stuff is preloaded. And not only preloaded, but the only thing you ever need to touch to control anything in your room is sitting in the palm of your hand with you all the time. That all of your content, music, everything is connected. So I say imagine a world like this is way off. We're beta testing this. We have built this functionality. It's in hotels. And I think we'll be in a position next year to roll it out globally. And I think that's a real game changer. Everybody has elements of that, and like you can stream, you can do, but nobody's sort of connected the Internet of Things so that all of the things that are going on in your room, you can control in a way that makes it a better experience. By the way, for our owners, it also allows, and for the environment, it also allows for huge opportunities on the sustainability front. Again, imagine, we know when you're in and out of your room. We can manage HVAC and lighting in ways that you never could before because we know what's going on. So from an energy savings point of view, immense opportunities beyond just creating what we think will be a far better experience for customers. I mean, think about it, every time I travel all over the world, even in our system, I'm not complaining to those that are on my team, but where do I find CNBC, or where do I find ESPN? I mean, everywhere you go in the world, every hotel you stay in, it's a little bit different. But in our world, you're going to walk in, it's preloaded, and everything is what you've selected. So you push ESPN on your Android or your iPhone, and it's on the TV. Right? You don't have to go searching around. It's all there. You want your Spotify account, it's all there. So the future is now. Somebody famous said that, okay. And that's happening. That's happening real time. I could share it with you.
Okay. Well, speaking of real time, we really went overtime, and so we're gonna unfortunately.
Sorry about that. I told you I was loquacious.
We've got a minute and 57 seconds here to ask a question. So we'll just go with one. When you think about brands that you're going to launch, and you've said 3 to 5 brands or something like that. What's the rollout process like?
Yeah, we're working on a number of them. I think in terms of the sequencing of them, probably in the not too distant future, we will create a capstone to our soft brands. It was always the intention to have, we started with Curio at the middle. We did Tapestry, to get 3-star, and we always wanted to have a capstone, which would be 5-star, to sort of have 3, 4, and 5 stars. So that's reasonably close. The other one that we've been working on is I call it a Hilton Plus, sort of, a higher level of Hilton, because we find there's a bunch of markets around the country that where we think there are opportunities just to get a little bit more rate, and do a Hilton Plus. I think that's not too far off. And probably, the other one that might take a little longer, because it's a really interesting project, is what I call affectionately our urban micro brand. So we set up a Skunk Works. I took a team out of our strategy and brand group, and I said, you get out of here. We put them in another building, and we sat around in the Skunk Works figuring out, what we thought this could be, looking at everything in the world, that was in this segment, with the idea being that, you have a lot of customers that want to now be in these urban environments, and even with our lowest priced products, they just can't afford to be in these cities, so we're giving up a lot of business. We're not getting customers in that environment into our system early in their travel lives, and so creating sort of a, really highly engineered micro room, think 125 to 150 square feet, but with unbelievable connectivity and flexibility as between the rooms, unprecedented levels. And then think about, with a really cool food and beverage, local vibe, and public spaces which are limited, but very very trendy in a sense, sort of like I hate to do, like a hostel on steroids, but on a lot of steroids. So the reason I don't have a date is because it's hard. I'd say in a sense, we've launched 5 brands, since I've been there. This is the hardest one. We will get it right, but it's the hardest one to create, not just engineer the room part of it to get it hyper efficient, but to really create the right vibe in that hotel, and to do it in a way where owners who are going to invest the capital can drive profits. At the same time, it's a fabulous experience for customers. So I think 2018, you will see our urban micro come out, but excellent. I want to get it right before launch.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you. Great to see you.